Hello, thank you so much for tuning in and sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome back if you have. My intention is unity and oneness and the highest levels of love light. I just wanted to pop on. It's morning for me. I'm still waking up with my coffee. So much to share. I just wanted to give a little energy update, but also go into a little inflow writing that I do. What's been showing up for me, and this is why I wanted to pop on here, are a lot of recycled patterns, recycled habits, old things coming up to be recognized and realized, we could say. But I'm recognizing them as me now, not as me when I had these patterns originally, or when these patterns were originally created. What this has led me to, and I'll get to my writing in just a minute and where this all ties in. The messages that continuously show up for me are all about heart-brain connectivity. A dear friend of mine who also gave me this necklace, Kat, introduced me years ago to heart math. And at the time, I was going through yoga teacher training. This was back in 2011. And a lot of the things that she was sharing with me about heart math were relevant to what I was learning in yoga about breath work and meditation and the chakras. And we would talk, and she was saying the same thing I was learning. I didn't quite understand what she was saying about certain things, and she didn't quite understand what I was saying about certain things, like the yoga and the chakra systems and all that. But she was giving me the science and a little bit of information based on the Merkaba and all of this. And so we were birds of a feather, we could say, learning together the same thing, but said in a different way. And I'm tying this in to share my writing that I share is saying the same thing that certain scientists, certain philosophers, or certain, and I'm not comparing myself to these scientists or philosophers, by the way, because half the time I write these words that come through when I'm in flow, which for me is coherence, which for me is the heart-brain connection. And that's what this writing that I'm about to share is about. Because, so we were just talking about the same things, just using different language. And a lot of the messages that come through for me over and over again are open up, the linguistics, how we play with words, the value that we assign and associate with what certain things mean. And this ties me back into cyclical patterns, because right now, many people, before I share this writing, are finding themselves recycling old habit patterns. But what I've been shown is we're in such a different place and space in our bodies and on Earth and in the solar system and in the galaxy and in the cosmos than we were perhaps when we were born, or perhaps before where we were before 1996, or perhaps before where we were in 2012. If that makes sense. And I'm using my reference to when I was going through teacher training was right before 2012. And I know when I experience these recycled things, these things that are coming up, and we think, why is this showing up for me again? It isn't, but it is. Part of it, what I've been shown, is it's just almost like we've created these grooves in our brain, and our body has created this mechanism that's associated with memory, that's associated with emotion, and that's part of what this writing is going to be about. That's associated with our attention and where our energy has gone. Where attention goes, energy flows. And it's created this cycle for us that has really helped create, from one perspective, who we are now, but from another perspective, it has nothing to do with who we are now, but it has everything to do with who we think we are, or what we believe we are, or the expectations that we've placed upon ourselves based on previous cycles that we have recreated over and over again in a slightly different way. So it's all about patterns and pattern recognition. And so and I'm going to go sidebar here just for a moment. I live a lot of my life, as much as I can, based on synchronicity. And I was called to look up certain writings that hold certain patterns that are cyclical. And yesterday we had the particle accelerator, the hadron collider. That was a big talk. And I'm not here to go into that too much, perhaps another video. But I decided to go back into my writings and see if I had ever addressed this particular particle accelerator. And lo and behold, I had. And I found it ironic that this accelerator was under maintenance. And apparently back in September, I don't know if it was last year or not, but I think it was, they couldn't get where they needed to go. And so now they restarted it and they've created more energy than they've created in the past. And I'm sharing this because to me, when we see these stories or when things pop up in our reality and awareness, it's a representation of other things. It isn't just about what's happening with CERN, for example. It's about what's happening within us. And the key words I had were discernment, right? Ironically, CERN. And discerning what's going on in our bodies, our habitat, our environment. And what I was called to recognize is that maybe it works now because it wasn't up to par, we'll say, before. And this, again, I'm inviting everybody to be open-minded and open-hearted about this, no matter what our beliefs are around the particle accelerator, no matter what our beliefs are around anything. We're really being called to reorganize and to, I've said this before in previous videos, adjust. And as we adjust to who we are now, we recognize that we're still holding within us everything that we were, but it's rearranging itself in a different pattern, if that makes sense. One of my dear friends and sisters the other day was saying, I feel like a broken record, or that's what I heard at least. She was kind of saying, I feel like I'm repeating this over and over again. I sound like a broken record. And I was shown that that's what's happening. The record has been broken, yet we still have all the information that's held within that record. It's just not going in the same spin. And so what do? We take all of that information that was held within that spin, that record, we're carrying it with us in our DNA, which is where I'm about to go with this writing. We're carrying it with us in our bodies, in our DNA, in our emotions, in our perspectives, in our view on reality, in what we are giving our attention and energy to. And everything is so connected. So a lot of people, I'm really called, and I'm going to do a separate video possibly tomorrow or the next day about this record being broken. But that's not where I'm going to go with this. I'm just going to tie it in with some of the activations that I've received and downloads I've received about our DNA, about our heart-brain connection. And I'm going to read what I wrote out loud. And then in the second part of the video, I will then share my screen and explain for anybody interested what it means, what I'm saying. Because I speak in code, which is really just words that are compounded or compacted with a lot of information. And I rearrange those words. And I actually talk about this in my video because one of my cycles personally and my patterns is self-doubt or thinking that what I'm doing isn't important. It isn't big enough. I should be doing this differently so I can do more, so that I can, whatever it might be. And oftentimes I won't post things because I second guess myself, or I feel like, who's really going to care about this? But what I'm shown by my higher self over and over again is that's not what's important. What's important is you're doing what brings you joy. And within this, you've accessed a deeper level, realm, expression, way of creativity that can then be shared with others that might change or shift the vibrational frequency that's in the field that we all exist in. And that's perfect. We are all doing that. I have goosebumps this entire time. We're all doing that in our own way. So I'm really being called we all have those moments where we feel like a broken record, or we feel like, oh, I'm going to go through this again. Or for me, it's this writing. I write things and I'm like, really? This is what's coming through? This makes no sense. Then I go back and type it up and I'm like, oh, okay. But my guidance team is like, look, you're doing it this way because my expectations based on my cycles, based on my patterns, based on my beliefs have put me into a box. And that box holds what I think I know. That box holds what I think I know about myself and what I think I know about the world around me. But that box has opened like origami. And our planes of existence have expanded. And our access points, the spaces and places that we access within our reality, have opened and expanded and broadened so much that the only thing holding us back right now is our beliefs about what that is, what that looks like, or from right now, what it should look like. This is the outcome we should be looking at. This is the expectation that we have. And I'm being called to speak briefly about when there's science experiments, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's where you watch the particles or waves go through and they land on a different place than perhaps it has to do with the viewer, right? And apologies, my knowingness in this reality is limited in science, but that's part of what I'm playing with the words, and I'll explain that in just a moment. But our expectations, the scientists' expectations about what that experiment should look like, affects the outcome of the experiment. That's been proven time and time again. And that's difficult for us to sometimes wrap our brain around. But what I've been shown is we are beginning to. And our focus, what our expectations are, is part of that focus. What we believe is going to happen, or what we believe has happened, is having an effect on our entire reality. Therefore, I'm always called to redirect my focus and my energy back inside. And part of this is about that as well, but also to recognize that we don't know everything. And that's the beauty of this. But we are creating moment to moment new things. So how can we possibly know everything if we are in the process of creating something new, even though from another perspective, everything has already been created? I know it's a lot, but I just wanted to play with this and just kind of share, this is what's been going on in my reality with my own expectations and my own cyclical patterns that are coming up, that are being shown to me over and over and over again. Yet now I look at it and I go, well, this isn't the same because I'm not the same. So that's another video, but I want to talk a little bit about this writing because I go into a little bit about DNA. I'm going to talk a little bit about an octopus. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I play with words, and I'm going to talk a little bit about genetics. So I'm going to share screen in just a moment. First, I'm going to read this out loud. You can just listen in, or you can fast forward if you want, or that might have just been enough for you. But essentially what I'm going to do is read. And as I was recording this, writing and typing it up, I was in several different vibrations. And so this is a perfect example of where my focus goes, my energy, where my energy goes, my focus goes, vice versa. So a lot of these words, I was in one space, and then I began to question things. When I'm in flow, I'm not just automatic writing. I'm actually using I'm pulling different things in. And so I went into a space of questions that I had because I was in a place of questions. My energy was, why am I getting this information this way? How come it's not this? And I was in a very left brain analytical place, and that'll come through in the writing. And my guides changed from expansiveness into a particular tunnel halfway through the writing, which I go back and I read it and I thought I should just stayed in flow, but I do feel this information can be valuable as well. So let us go into another spin. Let us dive into a new quandary. Dive into dive in, it, divinate, divine, innate, divide in eights. We are quarrying, if you will, digging up. There are questions that are coming up, that are surfacing based on a subset of genetic impulses that are being introduced into the brain chemistry. The brain chemistry is creating a new bandwidth, if you will. It is creating a new heartbeat, resonance measured on a chart. This new creative speaking sparks a new language from one perspective. And we invite you to play with these words again as a gentle reminder that the way that you communicate is part of our gifts, your gifts, the way that you allow yourself to play with certain tones and languages that are coming in are part of the many ways in which the universe weaves its spectrometry. You've gotten stuck in the mainframe, if you will, the main brain. We refer to the logical and analytical. We refer to as the analog it all. It puts a lockdown on the creative aspect. And this barrier that once was part of the brain encasement was set up that way as an entrapment system to trap into the folds of the brain particular particle pieces of information that may have activated a deeper simulation, stimulation. And as you tap into this, you recognize that the brain is reacting to, as in also. The brain is reacting to all of the harmonics that are playing a loop, if you will. As I'm writing this, I was seeing different things, and I also type up what I was seeing. So I'll share some of that as I read this. I was seeing a crochet loop, and I was seeing new loops that had been introduced. And these new loops are called open band loops. So they loop into, hook into, to introduce and induce a particular wave. But once they have looped in and connected, I was hearing, get yourself connected, writings on the wall. And I was hearing the song about Vanilla Ice. He took the record and he looped it. That was kind of stupid. They leave, they open, they tie in and dock in. Dodecahedron, hadron, collider, docking head. Hydrating, hydra radiating headspace. Creating more space in the brain, creating from this space, heart brain. I could stop there, but I'm going to just keep going. I'm going to read the whole thing, and then I'm going to come back and break this down in sections. Because as I read it, I learn more. We communicate in a very broad bandwidth so that the words that you remember, see, feel, hear, and connect into can bring you into any phase. Play on words, if you will. I was hearing phase lock conjunction and phase conjugation, which are two separate things. For example, Vanilla Ice leads me into Vanilla Sky, the movie, rapping, looping, The Minority Report, the other time loop movie that Tom Cruise is in, and Top Gun, which brings me into another time period, but brings me back into a cycle of when that movie was first created. I'll come back to that because it's relevant. It is a flavor in how you wordplay, rap. It seems so vanilla, but in actuality is so much, so much more. For these future representations you are speaking of, lost my place here, and how you speak these words, and as you remember how you tune into, this is going to assist you moving forward for words. You forget sometimes. You forget sometimes that your looping system is attached to a certain outcome, expectation. And we remind you that the outcome is consistently changing, for you are consistently creating choice patterns that reflect a changing and ever-loving, ever-loving, ever-loving landscape of flow, echo me. So I'm going to stop just for a moment. That reference of ever-loving brought me to Moby, the song Ever-Loving, and Mobius, and the reference to whale, Moby Dick. So these brain patterns are picking up now on a subtle, supple frequencies that before were blocked off. That's a play on words because of the order of the words. Interlopered, off. And so, guys, I'm just laughing because as I'm reading this, I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm just nerding out right now. So thank you for nerding out with me, you guys. You're watching this. So these brain patterns are picking up now on a supple frequencies that before were blocked off. Interloper, off. And so these receptive receptors were in the dark, so to speak. I was seeing a shark tank, the electrical sensory on a shark, and I was hearing they took a tank dive, didn't go anywhere. That's a play on words. So the way in which we interact with the patterns or frequencies or bandwidths, band words, and we use many of these words interchangeably, for we recognize there is a logical variation in the patterns of those words. I have to come back to this because I put a typo. The way in which we communicate, you, are most likely to open if you let go of the need to specify the exact quantification of the pontification that you are charging, because it depletes the charge when you get stuck on a certain subset or category of the definition, play on words. It's about the journey, not a destination. And I was also hearing Aerosmith, play on words. Just as you try to figure out exactly what the words are that you are speaking when you are, play on words, speaking multiple linguistics, reference to light language, we invite you to feel into what those words are, play on words, and let go of the need to differentiate each word pattern in a certain way that requires you to slow down your efficiency. Sometimes these words just need to get out so they can play a certain frequency in your own spin, in your own bandwidth, bandwagon, in your own recognition, in your own speech patterns, ignition, recognition, tune. It helps to activate the brain, and it syncs up the left and right hemispheres of the brain. And the speech patterns are purposefully said in such a way that it helps to sync them up. And I'm hearing lit display as I'm reading this. So I'm adding as I go, and I share this with you guys. And so we seek to talk about the brain today. I'm hearing seek and you shall find, because the brain patterns that we are actively interacting with are new to some. And this is where some versions of telepathy begin to kick in for some. This is also playing words because it's not just telepathy. And this is where the inner work is so important. The inner work, the inner workings of the brain is the key to access the domain, the dominion in the brain, heart brain, that allows us to fully unlock the codes and essentially get in the know, if you will. That's a reference to now. It helps us to understand is it ours or someone else's? And it helps to activate a charge, ours charge, so that we can decide whether to charge ahead or let go of that particular thought construct to move through the system so it can be integrated or expanded upon. So I was being shown there might be some ideas that we have, but it might not be anything we would necessarily utilize. Like a scientist might realize or utilize a mathematical equation when it comes through, but an English professor would not know what to do with it or know what it is. I was being shown that it helps everybody utilize or have access to more information, but we are also learning how to pick out the pieces and tune them into what is going to help us individually, rather than being stuck with all of this information that doesn't necessarily apply to us. We are then able to filter it better. I keep having this reference to whales and krill, and they filter out certain things when they are feeding so they don't ingest the wrong food or certain nutrients not necessary for their body. And I was hearing whale speak, like Dory. We are remembering how we communicate. And so we tune into this architecture and let go of the need to clarify all. So as we clarify certain representations and quandaries, we allow ourselves to map into this new frequency. And this new frequency of harmonics then allows us to interlope with certain people who are also picking up on these harmonics. It's like we ping off of each other, and this is how it's supposed to be. We are then able to fulfill certain contractual obligations, if you wish to call them that. So this is going into a separate subject. This is my tunnel vision here, but it's relevant. I am seeing a map, and this is how we have a blueprint. I chose to live here. Other people I contracted with live here as well. We connect, we ping and drop pins on the map, and then we essentially drop down in the mapping system where we live on the map, but also in our bodies. This helps us to fulfill certain need, and I'm hearing needful things. Divine orchestration of the blueprint. I could go into that a lot more. This has also been put on hold for many, yet this is also activating for many turning on. So we are subtracting from a certain number of people for whatever reason that have been delayed. But I am seeing the ones that do activate, this will be stronger. So the pull will be stronger. So the whole harmonic is louder and a longer wave farther away, but more effectively signaling. So I'll come back to this in the second part of the video. For as you access more pictures, as you access more abilities, you shift the realities in such a way that it has a ripple effect in the quantum exchange field. The field can't help but respond by moving. And I was seeing fascia. And this is part of the resolution that many contract holders have been waiting for. I'll come back to that. One layer is that the reality that we think, such as the astral, works in a different way than what we think. Again, expectations and beliefs. The trauma that we have accumulated has created a disconnect in so many ways, but we are fusing together by refusing to give in to the dialogue box, play on words. The dialogue that has kept us boxed in, kept us in entrapment and enslavement. And the more that we tune into the inner dialogue and not the false voices that many are tuned into, I see magic. That's when the magic happens. Do you believe in magic? I was hearing that song. The trauma was on scales, and trauma at death created a pattern even, and a disconnect from some ability to close out certain agreements. But that is shifting. And I am seeing that we are all doing work for our ancestors as well. If we choose to agree in free will, free willy. Come back, that's a whole other play on words. Some may say, why have a contract if you don't have to fulfill it? and I am hearing that we may make the decision that it is no longer necessary for either person's advancement. And on the flip side, the contracts change. So we may have updated flip-flop, flop-flip, floppy disk, bigger decisions. So we may still need to meet a certain person, but that person may no longer need to be in a relationship with us. I'm going to come back to that. We have now had an upgrade, and now the agreement is we still need to meet. Oh, the agreement is still made. And let me regroup on that one. We've now had an upgrade, and now the agreement is made. We still need to meet, for example, people meeting. And just by you meeting and interacting is going to help activate your DNA and help you remember certain things automatically. Deja vu, what you knew, what you know, and what they know. So what you knew, what you know, and what they know now, all is new, are now interacting, interreacting, reactivating on a subconscious level and chemical level. And this will activate in the other person, the knowing within themselves. You don't have to go through all of the time consuming, I was writing consume, and pain, suffering. They may stir up a thought in you that helps you to process self-discovery. And this will all lead to certain choices. I'll come back to this. This expedites the process, the sequential fascia that need to line up in order to get people there faster, yet expansively at the same time. This then alchemizes in the chemistry set of the brain, so to speak. That creates a new pattern that essentially disrupts the old pattern. Before, you may have felt the need for a relationship, but now some will instead know what that relationship would have brought forward by feeling it or seeing it reflected immediately. This creates a bond chemically that then docks in with each other, links in with each other, and helps the patterns to be seen, felt, understood, recognized, recognized now. Doing some spell checks as I do this. And this in itself can help expedite and fulfill certain contractual obligations or feelings or experiences that one may have agreed to at a certain level. And this is up-leveling, if you will. This creates a different feeling around time as well. This is going to change the way people will be interacting with each other. There will be a deeper reverence at certain points for certain interactions. And so this allows for certain geometries to be reconfigured, play on words, and allows for certain upgrades that are energy through to our energy. I'll come back to that. If your body mind thinks it is having an experience and it is producing the chemicals from that, it does not necessarily know the difference from one perspective. It may not be as rich and fulfilling as actually having gone through the journey, but in essence, we are being shown there are other things that we have now agreed to. So I'll come back and explain that later. How you interact and play with each other is key, for you could easily fall back into a habitual pattern of I, me, we, me, me, me. And this is where it comes back to doing the work. This is where operating from knowingness is key. Operating from a higher potentiality, potential reality of experiential freedom. If we haven't done the inner work, we may not realize that we have a choice. Some will meet someone and think, for example, that is my twin flame. But in reality is that they hold emotions, both perhaps, from unresolved conflicts, usually within. And the person thinks they are supposed to resolve it with the other individual. This may have been true at one time, but not necessarily now. If we feel that we cannot control our emotions for someone else, for example, that would be a misunderstanding of what emotions are. And this is all again from one perspective, from my perspective as I write this. There are other perspectives. Emotions are merely a form, from one perspective, of a charge. So when we have an intention connected with a charge, it then steers the ship, relationships, how we relate to others ships. It allows us to steer the ship in a different direction and use our emotions as a charge. I'm seeing dynamite, sticks, to push us through the experience and not push us into the experience and then get stuck in the loops, the patterns. This may be seen as a loophole, for we are creating at a whole new level. And I'm going to play with that a little bit more and add more to it, because I was hearing Aladdin, a whole new world, genie in the lamp, and I was seeing that as a reference to DNA. Many are not differentiating their feelings versus their emotions, which are very different, but equally connected, as all things are. They are connected to the chemicals in the body and the brain. And I'm being guided to play with that a bit. So how and where we direct. And I was hearing, if I only had a brain, Wizard of Oz, right? The green screen, the Emerald City. And many of us have been emotionally charged and have not processed these emotions logically. And I was hearing, put them up, put them up. So all these references to the Wizard of Oz and what each of those characters represents. But many are lost in the loops again and again, play on words, and are recharging the same emotion, motion, energy in motion. And also reference back to where energy goes, right? Where our focus goes, energy goes. And it does not allow us to be, play on words, redistributed through the system. It does not allow us to redistribute it through the system. That's all a play on words. Therefore, it does not allow us to ping the proper communication to the entire network. So within, as within, so without. Body and environment pings. And I'm going to come back to this. I was hearing emotions, minuscule, minuscule. Emotions are minuscule. They're only part of the entire thing, a small part of the entire educating system. So this is to be continued. I actually recorded more and I haven't written it up. And as you can see, it's very time consuming. So I have tablets that I have yet to type up, recordings that I have yet to type up, but we do what we can, right? So if you've made it this far, thank you so much for tuning in. And I invite you to stay along for my interpretation as I break this down or build it up, however you want to look at it. I have a lot of, I'm going to share screen in just a moment, and I'm just going to break it in pieces. So this whole video won't be the whole thing, but I'm just going to go back to at least the first paragraph. And I'm going to share screen. And because I think a lot of this has to do with our DNA. And in a nutshell, if you don't want to follow, if you don't want to keep listening, I understand, of course. This is a packet of information. Within it holds information about how our emotions work, but there's codes in here. What I'm going to do is go into those codes and show what they mean and what they represent within our body, within our matrix, our physical structure, so on and so forth. And also it has to do with what's going on in our evolution right now, in conjunction with what's happening in the world, in conjunction with planetary alignments, which I haven't even gotten into. This is also in conjunction with our adaptation, our earth. This isn't just about the emotions. This isn't just about DNA, but I've also shown that this also connects in with the previous writing that I did, which was called Soma, so much more, because this has a lot to do with the somatic system, the body. So I'm going to share screen briefly. Okay, let us go into another spin. Let us dive into a new quandary. So we're going to start with that. Whenever I'm talking about spins, I'm talking about a toroidal field. So if you don't know what a toroidal field is, I guess if you've never seen these videos before, I can share with you briefly, but I encourage you to look it up. And I always encourage, I always share the work of Dan Winter. I'm just going to share all these pictures. So it looks like this. It's this toroidal spin. It's around the body. We have a field around the earth, but look at the magnetic field of the universe. It kind of looks like an apple, right? And here's the tube right here. You guys probably can't see my arrow. I don't know if you can or not when I share screen, but this is us. Right here's a good picture to the left at the bottom, you in the center of that spin. And so that's what I'm basically talking about there. Let us dive into a new quandary. So if I go into quandary, I have pulled up here. Quandary is a state of great difficulty or perplexity. Part of this is difficult for me to explain what it is that I'm diving into. The ironic part about it is this is also a play on words, which makes it even more complicated. So if I look at this, I'm on etymology online, but it's Etym online. A state of great difficulty or perplexity, the word of unknown origin, and even the pronunciation is unsettled in older dictionaries. I love that because that basically sets the tone for what it is I'm about to explain. We don't know what it is. And I'm laughing because the synchronicity for me is yesterday we had the particle accelerator, the Hadron Collider at CERN was reactivated. It was set up and they had another experiment. And the purpose, and I'm not here to talk about what the real or false purpose is not relevant for this video. The idea is they're trying to recreate the Big Bang. From my perspective, what I understand it, they're trying to accelerate particles to create creation so they can better understand what creation looks like. Maybe they're trying to create a black hole at a minuscule amount, whatever it might be. But it's ironic that they're using this massive machine, and they have them apparently more of these other places, to tell us more about what is unknown. They're going outside of themselves and creating this to understand what's going on inside, where creation originated from. So this is a synchronicity that I'm tying in with what I wrote. Also, the other part about this is, perhaps it is a quasi-Latinism based on the Latin quando. When? What time? So who, what, why, when, where, how? I think that's ironic. Also, it's linked to quo, which is, it forms all or part of cheese, the big cheese, a big thing, a stage, direction. I like quasi here. That's always fun. It comes provided by Sanskrit, ka, who, which, and then we talk about the ka and the ba, right? We're talking about the body. We're talking about the Merkaba. We could go into so many different things. Quid pro quo, right? Oops, that's the link to air conditioning. Let us dive in to divinate. Now, this is all a play on words. So we're going into this new quandary. We're diving in, going inside, D-I-V-E, going underneath or in the water. Divinate, the divine innate in itself. What does that mean? Well, innate is essentially innate. And then I put divide in eighths, or look at the eight, structure of the eight. And as we know, eight is infinite, infinite, infinite. And I'm going to play with this just for a moment. So I thought it was important to go into divinate a little bit and play with this, because this is a living light language. This grows as I learn more about what it is that I'm tuning into. And I wanted to play with these words, phi, eight, innate. And so that always reminds me of the if we look at eights, right, we're looking at the infinity symbol, right? And phi, which is the golden ratio, the golden means. And I'm just going to golden mean. I always make that longer than it actually is. But hold on just a second. I'm going to pause. So we're playing a little bit with word soup here. But essentially, if we look at golden ratio, which is phi, P-H-I, okay, we're looking at, is that right? Oh, Fibonacci. I mean, we could play with this so many different ways, but let's play with this just for a moment. I love this because it basically says, also known as the golden section, golden mean, or divine proportion, divinate, divine. And we'll just go on Wikipedia, even though I've got too many screens open. I love this. This article is about the number. For the Ace of Base album, see the Golden Ratio album. That's funny. But there's also golden number time. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. But anyways, two quantities are the golden ratio. If they're same as the ratio, they're summed to the large. Okay. I just want to go into, I'm not going to go into all of this because obviously I don't know enough to go into all of it. But here's phi. And all it says here is the 21st letter of the Greek alphabet. So this is not the actual exact definition of that, but this is another example. Now, I've talked a lot about aspect ratio, and I'll come back to that in a different video. But I recommend, if you're feeling called and interested, to check out Dan Winter's site. And I'm just going to go into briefly the innate, because this goes back to our DNA. Essentially, what I was playing with is dive into the innate. Let's go back to the innate. And what is the innate? Well, the innate, I'm looking at etymology again of it, existing from birth. It's in us. It's natural, okay, to be born in, originate from. And it also is talking about languages. Where did this come? Where did language come from? And again, that's the quandary. Who, what, where, when, why? To be born, to give birth. And I love all of these. Look at all these words where this came from. Isn't that crazy? I just love it. Now, I also like to go to Sanskrit because that's one of the oldest languages that we have access to. And it talks about, it is the hypothetical source of evidence called interior, in, going within. So ironically, when I'm talking about when we dive in, when we divinate, we are going within the infinity, the infinite, the infinite, the golden ratio, the spin. Let's find it within. And that's that entire paragraph play on words. We are quarrying, if you will, digging up. And so I want to talk about that briefly. I stopped. I just have to laugh, you guys. I live my life based on synchronicity. And part of the reason I was called to bring up this writing that I did months ago was because it's relevant for a lot of reasons, but I just lost it. Sometimes I look up the etymology of the words, and that's one of my favorite websites is that Etymology Online, Etym Online. And I provide the links on my blog, so you can go and check out all of it if you want to. But I also use my right brain. So I'm not just using I'm not using just my analytical side, right? I'm also utilizing my creative side. So when I go to these sites, I go with what I'm hearing, what I'm seeing. Sometimes it's accidental, and I'll click on something by accident, but it'll actually lead me to what I was looking for. And that to me is synchronicity, and it's relevant because I'm going to get to that later. But even now, as I'm reading this with you guys, I was guided to look up Corey, but I already recorded part of this and I deleted it because it just wasn't complete enough. And I knew that there were more layers. And as soon as I decided that, I found all of these synchronicities that brought more to the surface when I quarried, when I dug deeper. And as I'm talking about this, when we quarry something, obviously we're digging for something. It's under the earth. What does a quarry hold? It's usually a rock. It's a mine, not mining necessarily like for gold, but we're taking out pieces of something, right? We're taking out pieces of the whole, the pie, PHI, pi, golden ratio. And what happens is I hear in my mind, seek and you shall find, right? So there are questions that are coming up that are surfacing. Now, this is also play on words. So if I go digging up and I look up quarry etymology, it says that it's literally a place where stones are squared. Now, the ironic part about this is yesterday when I decided to do this video, there was another writing that I haven't even got quarried yet that I wrote that came up on a different piece of my notes. And it talked about don't be so square. Now I'm going to go back and look at that because now I'm putting these writings together in a non-linear order. Okay. So what I'm seeing is we're doubling. So when we find something, I'm being called to explore this briefly. And so here we are with quarry. Okay. Literally a place where stones are squared. You're digging in the hole. Oh, this is so interesting. You guys, this is what I'm talking about. Thanks for nerding out with me. Well, an animal being hunted is called quarry. This is not what I'm talking about. When you dig a hole in the earth looking for rocks, both the digging and the hole are called a quarry as well. I love that, you guys. That is so relevant for what this writing is about. Quarry derives from the Latin heart. That's gross, because hunters used to drape the entrails of their chosen quarry on their dogs' backs. Okay, that's really gross, but I read this in a completely different way. I don't literally see that. I see that it derives from the Latin cor, heart. Now, I see the entrails as being the inside, wearing your heart on your sleeve, wearing your heart on your back. And I know that sounds like a gross, putting those two things together, but I just see it from the Latin heart. So there's more, of course, but wait, there's more. This says it's based on Latin from quadrum, which is a square. Ooh, I could go into so much more here. Okay, but I'm just going to pause for a moment. And down the rabbit hole we go. So I'm in quadrum, square section, square shape. Each quadrum is given a name that is a portmanteau, which is what I speak all the time, of the terrestrial months of the season that quadrum is equivalent to. Well, I don't know what that is, but let's play with that because we're going down the rabbit hole. So this is talking about a rim world. Oh my gosh, you guys. This has to do with games, I think, but this is time. Time in RimWorld is split into two related sections. This is hilarious. You guys, a lot of what I write about, we can talk about DNA. We can use it in computer programming. We can use it in games, but this is hilarious. Time in RimWorld passes as a series of ticks on a normal game speed. It just talks about, their year is divided into 4 quadrums, so squares, but I just see this as really funny. A funny synchronicity, right? So it's broken up into these parts, okay? But it's also it goes along so much. Okay, so before I get more distracted there, I also see this as a square, as when you find the square root of something, or when you square something, you double it, right? You make it bigger, you make it, it's two of the same thing. And that's been coming up for me a lot. I'm just laughing because for any of you guys that are math or science people, if you watch this, you're probably looking at me like, no, it's this. And I'm stumbling along trying to figure out what some of this is. But essentially digging up led me to quarry, which led me to quadrant or quadrum, but quadrum for me is quad. It's a 4, right? 4, which also leads me to 4th dimension, 4 dimensions. It leads me to thinking of the astral plane, which I talk about briefly later in this writing. And basically it's so much is coming up, Soma. And if I look into doubling or squaring something, we're looking at the square root of something. Where it came from is part of it, but it's also what we're doing is creating more of this. And this is my own interpretation of the word. This also leads me to talking about the golden ratio. We're just asking more questions about all of this. Okay. When I talk about dividing in 8s, I wrote about divinate, divide in 8s, find 8. It also reminded me of pieces of 8. So pieces of 8 were gold pieces, right? That we would find. So there would be a pirate ship and, or Spanish ships, and we're still, they use pieces of the whole pi, PHI, to pay for things, for value, right? And some of these would carry, some of these people would carry these pieces of 8 around their neck or as necklaces, right? Which is ironic because I'm wearing a heart with the flower of life from one perspective that my dear friend got me. But so essentially what's happening is synchronistic. I don't wear this a lot. I have it hanging in my office usually, but I was called to wear it and I see it being so symbolic right now. Okay. So essentially within this infinite, the 8 is also a Mobius strip from another perspective. It's an infinite. We're finding the innate within us, which is in our DNA. Part of our DNA is to ask questions. That's part of what we do as humans. And essentially back to the pieces of 8, we're finding buried treasure. We're finding pieces of the whole piece of gold, the whole golden ratio, the whole circumference, right? And this is, I make reference later in the writing to steering the ship, which makes me think of pirates, pi, the phi rate, the rates and proportions of the golden means. So this is all connected to our evolution, to us recognizing who and what, right? The quandary of what we really are. So we're in the process of quarrying, questioning, digging up, and there's more. So I know if I post this, I'll come back to more quarries here, the quarries, the digging, the rocks, the minerals, the going within, the quadrant, not quadrum, the quadrum, which also reminds me of a 4 and a drum. So if I think of that, I think of a drum as something that holds something. Okay, it used to be in the shape maybe of a square, but now we've expanded that out, and that's a play on words as well. Also, it makes me think of a rhythm, the heartbeat, the drum of the heartbeat, and a sound, right? And I'll get to that because I talk about that later. A quadrum. In fact, I should just write that down before I forget where this led me, right? Okay. So there are questions that are coming up that are surfacing. So they're coming up. Literally, we're seeing them on the surface now, based on a subset of genetic impulses that are being introduced into the brain chemistry. So I'm going to stop just for, well, the brain chemistry is creating a new bandwidth, if you will. It is creating a new heartbeat. So I'm going to play with this just for a moment. So for those of you who don't know what a subset is, I always talk about the bubble within the bubble. So I'm back on Wikipedia, and here's a bubble within a bubble. And I love this because A is not separate from B. It is a subset of B. Therefore, they are part of the same bubble. Earlier, I talked about a record, and I said, I think I did, if I remember correctly. And I talked about we broke the record, which is a play on words, and I'm being called to talk about that briefly. So I will. But before I do that, basically they're all part of. So if A is a subset of B, then A is also an element of B. Okay. And this talks about a relationship of one set being a subset of another is inclusion or containment. Now, what I'm writing about is talking about our container, our brain, our bodies, but also our reality. And there are many things I could go into here. I love this. Look, it's a bubble within a bubble. That picture right there. Ooh, this is also symbolic and synchronistic. So I look at that as a bubble chart. One bubble leads to another bubble. This is how I write. This is what synchronicity is. It's all connected. But if I look at that shape, it's also a square in this particular model. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? It's got 4 faces. It's a cube. It's not a square. But I'm looking at this as a cube, even though it's got a diamond up here, but we'll just play with that for a moment. So I see that as symbolic. It's a symbol that represents something bigger to me. And I'm digging in to see what that symbolism is in relevance to language, in relevance to our bodies, in relevance to our DNA. In mathematics, especially order theory, a partially ordered set formalizes and generalizes the intuitive concept of an ordering, sequencing, or arrangement of the elements of a set. So we're talking about, it defines a partial order. So if I go back to what I wrote, it's based on a subset of genetic impulses. Now, I'm going to talk about that briefly. So it's the order of the genetics, the DNA. It's the order of the genetic impulses. Now, I'm going to talk briefly. An impulse is something that we do impulsively. We don't necessarily feel like we have control over it. My grandmother was a nurse, and she was amazing. She went back to nursing school when she was in her 50s, or she became a nurse when she was 50. And essentially, she would always say, it's in the genes. You can't help it. It's in the genes. But in theory, which we're seeing across the board of the experimentation that's going on with our genetics, the idea is, well, you can help it if it's in the genes. And from my perspective, with all of this, we can also do this from the inside out. We don't necessarily need any type of manipulation. We are already doing this because of the environment that we are evolving within, because of the bubble within the bubble. This is also based on our habitual patterns, way of thinking, and what we are doing energetically with our thoughts, our body, and our intentions. This essentially is changing our habit patterns, the order of the way things are happening, as above, so below, as within, so without. So theoretically, we are changing ourself from the inside out. This changes our entire DNA mapping system. And I'm not talking about using manipulation to do that. I'm talking about our natural, innate, which I wrote about earlier, abilities. We're pulling these up to the surface and we're going, wow, look at what we can do. So these questions that are coming up are surfacing based on a subset of genetic impulses, a partial order of these impulses. And that there's more to that. I know I'm just getting a piece of the pie here. I was called to talk a little bit about genetic impulses because this is also a play on words. When I see this, I see it as pulses, like a heartbeat, like a pulse, like a lifeline. And when I say lifeline, it leads me to a synchronistic article that came into my awareness last night after I read this, what I had written, that brought me more answers. And just like when I talk about the Tom Cruise thing next, you'll maybe see the synchronicity here. Okay, so what happened is I found this, I got a little bit distracted, but there are questions that are coming up based on this subset of genetic impulses. My synchronicity was last night I was drawn to an article that was about octopuses. I love octopi. They are magical creatures to me. Some people refer to them as aliens, right? Aren't we all? And extraterrestrial, we'll call them. And so anything about octopus, I tend to look at because I find them fascinating. You know, their hearts, plural, the brains, plural. Okay, so the article that that came up, I will share with you guys, that I find was very synchronistic because we're talking about genetic impulses here. Was on, I'm on livescience.com or livescience.com, but I'm pretty sure it's live science. Oops, now I'm stuck in pop-ups. Octopuses may be so terrifyingly smart because they share humans' genes for intelligence. I got so excited, I was like, I knew it. So I got to come back to subset. I got to close some of this out because my computer's running really slow now. So if I go down and I make this article a bit bigger so you can see it, and I encourage you to read the article because it is interesting. And I don't know if this is going to be big enough, but I was then led to, well, that's really big, this beautiful octopus, a genetic quirk. The clues that scientists are uncovered are called jumping genes or transposons. They make up 45% of the human genome. What? Jumping genes are short sequences of DNA with the ability to copy and paste or cut and paste themselves to another location in the genome. They've been linked to the evolution of genomes in multiple species. Genetic sequencing recently revealed that 2 species of octopus also have genomes that are filled with these. In both humans and octopuses, most transposons are dormant, either shut down due to mutations or blocked from replicating by cellular defenses. One kind, known as the long interspersed nuclear elements, you guys, I'm just like having so much fun with this, so bear with me. Or line may still be active. Evidence suggests that line jumping genes are tightly regulated by the brain, but are still important for learning and for memory formation in the hippocampus. Now, this article, I could just do an entire video on what I'm talking about, but I added pulse line of pulse, and IM because of this synchronicity, and it also ties in with other things I've written. So it helped me make sense of what I've been writing about the body and the genes, the genome in the body. So these questions are coming up, that are surfacing, are based on, so there's something that we're learning about genetics, but it's also based on, they're coming up because of our advancement, because of what we're activating within us. That's creating us, it's creating more questions because we're the ones asking these questions. And I could go into so many different layers here of reality. This has to do with dimensions. So essentially what I'm seeing is, because we've expanded our reality, because we're existing within a different time bandwidth, because our bandwidths are encompassing so much more, we're then able to access this knowingness. But we're asking these questions and we're getting answers from science, but I'm hearing hyperdimensionally. Oh, I could play with that. All right. So as I learn about what it is that I'm tapping into, more comes in. So synchronistically or simultaneously, as we ask more questions, seek and you shall find, as we expand, we are guided to ask more questions, to learn more, but to experience more. And essentially, the word hyperdimensionally is coming in as I'm talking about these genetic impulses and these subsets and the questions that are coming up. And if I go into the share screen, and I go on hyperdimensional, of or pertaining to a system having more dimensions than naturally observed in our universe. But I loved the example they used. A game of tic-tac-toe in 4 dimensions is hyperdimensional. I probably could have found a better, I don't know if this is going to show me pictures because I'm in Wiktionary instead of Wikipedia. I don't think so. But having said that, for those of you who don't know, I'll just go on Wikipedia and here's a picture of a dimension example. The dimensions of the cube, of the square. Ironically, the square is what comes up. The Tesseract, if you guys haven't seen Marvel Comics. This has 6 square faces, but it consists of 8 cubical cells. Now, I laugh about that because I'm writing about 8s divided up into 8s. And this to me represents, I mean, it looks like basically a fourth dimensional. So it's a 4D that requires a projection, a linear transformation. Okay, so I'm obviously not a mathematician, but I love this. So projecting a sphere onto a plane. So this is what the plane looks like. Even though it's just a sphere, this is what the geometry of that might look like. And so essentially, the subset is a plane within a plane. If we want to look at this, the geometry within a geometry, which then will lead me to Star Mother Kit, which I'm going to get to in just a minute. But so these are surfacing based on a subset of genetic impulses. So it's something inside of something, okay, held within something. And these impulses, the pulse line, the line of pulse, I am, which I think is funny because I am, or I am, right? M. So that's even a play on words, are being introduced into the brain chemistry. So as we have this awareness, our brain chemistry turns on. We activate a deeper potential for knowing more. But this isn't just about our brain, it's about our pulse. It's about our heart. So as we make these connections through our heart, and we are then able to understand more, we have a broader perspective. We become multidimensional, hyperdimensional. And I know that I could go back into this and go deeper because I think the hyperdimensionality, there's a lot more to that. And where did I say that? I can't remember now. I'll have to go back and write that down. Okay. So now if I go back into, oh, I lost my octopus. So that's the dimensions. That's hyperdimension. I don't know if hyperdimensional will show it, but it's beyond what we can see. That was what was coming through. And I think I will go back in and do more on that. Now I was called to go back into, if this is the one, while that's pulling up, I want to talk about, speaking of subsets and things being locked within each other and geometries, eventually we're going to get to the Star Mother, which Dan Winter uses to show all of the nesting platonic solids. And apologies if I'm butchering the definition of what it is. I know it's a lot more than that. But let's get back to the genes, shall we? So these genetic impulses, it's naturally innate within us. I kind of think of the 100th monkey. You guys haven't looked at the 100th monkey effect, you know, and I'm going to mess up the story a little bit, but there's these monkeys and 99 of them are doing a certain thing. And then monkey number 100 learns how to break open fruit a different way. And then all the other monkeys automatically know how to do it. because it's genetic, it's within them. So when I'm activating through this technology, which is my skin suit, I'm also, and I share it with others, I'm also interacting through the main brain, everything else. This is different than, it's like bees in a beehive, but it's different than a hive mind. And the reason is each of our genetics differ slightly. Oh, there's so many different reasons. That's just one reason. Our experiences are different. Our memories are different. Our brains function in the same way, but individually, our brains all function slightly different because of the mapping system that we all have and our experiences that we've all, our mapping system that we've all created based on the experiences and the memories that we have and more. Okay. So this is being introduced in the brain chemistry. The brain chemistry is creating a new bandwidth, if you will. It is creating a new heartbeat, resonance measured on a chart. So we'll get to resonance in just a minute. I think I spelled hyperdimensional wrong. But anyways, let's get into this pulse line. So I went into genomics. I'm on the Johns Hopkins Medicine. And there's a reason this is, again, I found this through Synchronicity. I'm gonna let you guys read this on your own if you want to. Medicine Matters blogs. Once I post this blog, I'll post all of the links. But essentially, line 1. Now, I have written oftentimes things like jump in the line. Right. I believe you, jump in the line, rock your body on time. So I'm not even sure. Oops, I do not want to stop that recording. I've done that before and had to start all over again. So for me, I was hearing jump in the line, rock your body on time. And I don't even know if those are the right lyrics, but that's what I was hearing. So that from Beetlejuice. Who is that? I can't remember his name right now, but he's great. Anyways, shoot. Anywho, Harry Belafonte. Okay, so rock your body on time, quarry, rock, dig your body on time. Jump in the line, jumping. You guys, I can't make this stuff up. I could. That would make me crazy because I am. Aren't we all? So that to me was playing in the back of my mind. I'm like, why is this song playing over and over again as I wrote? So these are jumping genes. Jump in the line, rock, we're quartering, digging your body on time, in time, measurements, percussion, heartbeat, rhythm, coherence. When we get into a space of coherence, we rock our body on time. We come into emotion, emotion, energy in motion. It puts us in flow. It connects our hemispheres of our brain. It assists us in creating what it is that we then change, our expectations then change. How we view the world changes. Therefore, how we create in the world changes. And this is so relevant right now. Well, all the time, all of the time. Our relationship with time changes. The structure of our reality, our body, our skin suit, our technology changes. We then activate to a fuller potential. And I'm hearing drip, drip, drip. Santa Claus down the chimney. We activate our pineal. Our synapses fire differently. We become like the octopus, more intelligent, more situationally aware. I'm not always situationally aware, my husband says, but that's a whole other ball of wax. Having said that, we are, this is part of our genetic impulse. So this is a deeper layer of what that means and what that represents and what it looks like. And it's taking us into the multidimensional, hyperdimensional. And again, I'll have to go back and do that on a different video. So this is the chemistry, right? creating different chemical reactions in the body. And as we create these chemical reactions, it then alchemizes, changes, I'm hearing transduces, transduction, I should write that down too, and it creates a new bandwidth. And I don't think I shared bandwidth, so we're going to talk about that. A musical scale, a harmonic, a musical note. Many of us have heard about the Schumann resonance in the earth. We all vibrate at a certain frequency. We could say 432 hertz, the heart, but it's more than that. We're creating a new human, not with outside, but environmentally, it is changing us. That's a whole other ball of wax, a whole other video, but we are adapting to our environment without necessarily having to work with artificial things. It's happening naturally. It's happening innately, and it's happening faster and easier when we connect our heart-brain coherence. And this is measurable. And again, I'm going to bring up Dan Winter. Check him out. You can go to fractalfield.com. The reason I bring him up so much is because I think I already said this. I'm going to say it again. I write this. Somebody on YouTube reached out and said, have you ever heard of Dan Winter? I was like, maybe a long time ago. Mind blown. This is what he talks about all the time in almost all of his videos. And it's fascinating. I highly encourage you just to check it out. And again, taking all of this into, this isn't all 100%. This is just pieces of the whole pie. Nobody has the entire picture. Technically, we all do, because we are the entire picture, but not from an egoic perspective. So the brain chemistry is creating a new bandwidth. We'll talk about that later. I'm actually running low on time, so I want to just finish this this section. What I've gone on to now is mobilednajournal.biomed-central.com. Again, I'll share the links once I post this in my blog. So I had just written a post called Soma and so much more. And I knew there was so much more to it, even then after the video that I did that was an hour and a half long. This is an ongoing living like codex of information. So this is mobile DNA. It's talking about retrotransposition in the soma, a field jumping ahead. Ironically, it's the jumping genes, right? Jump in the line. Now, rock your body in time. Okay, I believe you. So the soma, the body, the somatic, think about the cranial sacral fluid and what that does in the body. Right? And there's so much more to the meaning of the word soma, but let's talk about that just for a moment and go into soma. And the site that I was just on talked about taking the genes, and essentially there is a negative side to this jumping gene. And the idea is that it's mostly based around cancer. So I'm sure that there's going to be some research that will be coming up, but they're finding that it can actually help with cancer. Just like when you have too much of something, it's all about balance. So sometimes in the previous article, we brought up octopus and on the brain. So our brain, and I wrote this earlier in what, oh no, I write this later, talking about the brain blocked some of this to protect itself. Also, it could be that someone messed with our genes, perhaps at some point in some stage of our evolution. And so maybe it was blocked intentionally, or it was intentionally blocked because our body was like, nope, you can't have too many of these jumping genes. Otherwise, we're going to speed up time. We're going to jump ahead, which takes me back to this article. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And again, I will provide these resources. I'm not going to accept cookies. Darn it. I'll have to delete cookies afterwards. So it talks about germ, embryonic, and tumor cells. Ironically, in the embryo, it doesn't hurt us. It's later on. Maybe because of exposure, maybe because the order of our genes. That's a whole other video again. But it talks about At present, the line family appears to be the most active experiential data. Okay, let me find this and then I'll read what I was looking for. It's a little down the line, so to speak. One of the things that was interesting here is it talks about a lot of what I've read is they think that the jumping genes was responsible for cancer, tumors and things like that. But what they found, or certain brain wanting to say malware in the brain, malfunctions, right? But it talks about the elevated L1 line DNA content reported several neurological disorders may be predominantly accumulated unintegrated line nucleic acids rather than somatic line or L1 insertions. So that's interesting, because now it's not necessarily because of the actual protein or RNA. Again, I'm not a DNA person or genetic. I don't know much about genetics, but I'm just going to share, as I read this, I got it. It made sense. So it's talking about the biological impact of somatic retrotransposition. Now, that's something else I have to do separately because that wasn't in my writing, but that is part of the rabbit hole that we've gone. Okay, I stopped share just for a moment because I have to actually find this article, but I'm kind of running low on time and I want to get to the juice. So essentially, the first thing I didn't really talk about on the live science, and this goes to what I write later about the brain and the blockages that we may have produced. I will come back to that. But these jump line or elements may still be active. So we've got, in both humans and octopuses, most transposons are dormant, junk DNA, either shut down due to mutations or blocked from replicating by cellular defenses. But one kind of transposon in humans, known as the long interspersed nuclear elements, which I said, may still be active. And this comes with all the writings I've talked about nuclear. Why are they calling it nuclear? I'll have to dive into that. Evidence from prior studies suggests that line jumping genes are tightly regulated, but are still important for learning. Okay, I said that. The human genome, this is on biolibratexts.org. The human genome contains over 1 million lines. You guys, how many times have I written read between the lines? So I could put all these things that I've posted and look at a whole new meaning for what I've written about. 1 million, representing 19% of the genome. That's only 19% of the genome. The most abundant of these belong to a family called line 1. Synchronicity there. These L1 elements are DNA sequences that range in length from a few hundred to as many as 9,000 base pairs. Ace of base. Only about 50 L1 elements are functional genes. That is, can be transcribed and translated. Now, as I read this, I'm mind blown too, because I transcribe and translate what I'm downloading from my own universal connection to my higher self. So this can also have a reference to writing, language, so many things. The functional L1 elements encode 3 proteins, and then it talks about cutting DNA, reversing certain things naturally within the body. Through this copy-paste mechanism, the number of lines can increase in the genome. The diversity of lines between individual human genomes makes them useful markers for DNA fingerprinting. I believe in this writing, I write about fingerprints, or I did it in the Soma writing or the one before. So in the last 3 writings, I've done something about fingerprints. Now I'm connecting the dots. I'm reading between the lines here. Variation occurs in the length, a longer line, which is symbolic of the long range, the heart, the long wave. I also talk about this in here. sometimes occurs downstream into additional DNA, producing a longer transposed element. Okay, there's a lot here. But it does say they're not functional. But they may play a role in regulating the efficiency of transcription of the gene in which they reside. So there's a lot there to unpack, and we're obviously not going to do that in this particular video. But if I look at what I've written here, they're coming up and surfacing based on a subset of genetic impulses. So I'm just seeing stuff moving around. And this reference to the octopus, we have this deeper potential. We're studying it to figure it out, but how often are we actually going within and linking these things together through practice and inner knowing, which is what I write about later on a more basic format, right? On a more simplified reason as to why this is relevant for us. Okay, so they're being introduced into the brain chemistry. I need to go in a little deeper to what does brain chemistry mean. But let's just talk about chemicals. When we have chemistry, we're mixing together certain chemicals. They talk about line DNA being referring to it as nuclear. Well, hydrogen. Well, if I go to hydrogen, I'm going to talk about that briefly. I'm going to go on to Star Mother Kit. This on geometricmodels.com. This brings me back into Dan Winter. I have a little bit of a delay because I have so many screens open. Here is the Star Mother Kit. All of the platonic solids nesting inside of each other, and that's what it looks like. Later on, I talk about a dodecahedron, which I'm sure has something to do with this. Here's the toroidal spin. This talks about negentropy. So it is a precise model of the geometric origins of biologic negentropy, fractal, conjugate, space-time. And I'll come back to this picture a little bit later. So we talked earlier about golden mean, the radii of hydrogen in the relation to Planck radius core. And I know this is kind of like, I love this spider web. Isn't that fun? The tunnel, the toroidal field, this is inside of it. The hydrogen center bond of each codon is phase conjugate, fractal, implosive, and negentropic. I don't even think I say that right, but that's okay. We'll come back to this because it's so relevant. So this is what our brain chemistry is creating, implosion. All of our chemicals are rearranging and creating patterns. Now, from a simplistic manner, this comes back to our patterns. Energy. Let's create new patterns. We still have the same building blocks of matter. This Star Mother Kit is an example of all of the platonic solids included in that package on that record. So I'd love to come back in here and dive deeper into hyperdimensional, into brain chemistry, and talk about what I see in with this layer. But we'll do that in a different video. Okay, I've got about 10 more minutes, 15 more minutes. This new creative speaking sparks a new language. I'm sure I left something behind and I didn't go into all of it there having to do with genetics, but I'll come back to that probably later as well. This new creative speaking sparks a new language. All right, language is communication. Language is a way of communicating, right? It incorporates not just sound, but incorporates movement. We invite you to play with these words again. So I wrote this months ago, but my guidance system is like, go back and play with it again. Look at what else this could mean. This is relevant for all of us. We're in a cycle right now. We're in a pattern. So we can go back and look at this lower rung on the ladder, where we've come from, pull that information, thinking of that as DNA, and we can cut and paste it where we need it to go now. It doesn't have to look the same. It doesn't have to sound the same, but we still have what we've learned from it, what we've, how we've grown from it. And now we can utilize it, or we can just get rid of it altogether because it's no longer necessary. It's already been integrated. It's already part of who we are. This sparks a new language from one perspective, and we invite you to play with these words again as a gentle reminder that the way you communicate is part of your gift, our gift. You guys, that's a message to all of us. It was a message to me because I was going through a cycle of, why am I saying this? This doesn't make any sense. I sound like I'm speaking a bunch of gibberish, which reminds me of Jitterbug, which reminds me of Dan Winter. Anyways, we all have the gift of language. We all have the gift of communication. This is done through sound, touch, looking at someone, hugging someone, speaking to someone, listening. All of this is a form of communication. This is part of our gift, the whole package. The way that you allow yourself to play with certain tones and languages is part of the gift that are coming in, are part of the many ways in which the universe weaves its spectrometry. So I'm going to pause. So how we share this and how we play with this is one of the many ways. We each have our own unique individual expression. Not everybody's going to do what I do. Not everybody's going to do what you do. And that, what would the point be? It wouldn't be as much fun. But the universe weaves its spectrometry through this type of communication, through these tones. It's the soup that we exist in. That is the Big Bang. That is still creating. And I'm not saying that we were created from the Big Bang. That's a theory that they're trying to prove with this particle collider, for example, from one perspective, or that's what we're being told. But there's other things that will come with this knowledge, of course. So I'm bringing that up because it's synchronistic with what I wrote and the timing of when all of this is presenting itself and these questions are being asked. So also representation of more power. We have more power than we did before. So I'm just going to go in and share with you. And so here we are. I'm on Google and I just put in the word spectrometry. So the universe weaves through this spectrometry. I love the picture of the Pink Floyd, the prism, the triangle, is the measurement of the interactions between light and matter and the reactions and measurements of radiation intensity and wavelength. In other words, it's the method of studying and measuring a specific spectrum. Now, part of that spectrometry is how the universe weaves. The universe weaves its spectrometry. The universe is weaving its measurement of the interactions. It is the reaction and measurement of radiation intensity. And I'm being guided to go on to Wikipedia here, and I'm going to end after this and do a part 2 because I'm pooped out here a little bit. I like this because if you look at the different forms of spectrometry, optical spectrometry, there's ion mobility spectrometry, there's all kinds of things, the mass to charge ratio of ions. So it's a way of measuring these things, right? But I like the optical one because it talks about the electromagnetic radiation as a matter of function of the wavelength of frequency. So I could go into a whole, because this takes me to something else I wrote, which was spectroscopy. So I'm being called to go on to that. So optical spectrometry is the same as spectroscopy. And it is, but it's also, this just is the electromagnetic spectra, it looks like. And again, wavelengths and photons, matter waves, gravitational waves, blah, blah, blah. I love this though, because in simpler terms, it is the precise study of color as generalized from visible light. So these are fun, right? All those different ways of light is seen through this. This is our visible light within the portion that is perceived by the human eye. That's all we get to perceive. So there's much more. And this again, all about perspective. So this is how the universe weaves it, through sound, through tones, through languages. We are weaving it. Now I'll just end on this. I put, you've gotten stuck in the mainframe. So when I wrote this, I was like, why? This doesn't make sense. It wasn't just what I was writing, it was what I was seeing going on in the world at the time. What was this? I don't know how many months ago I wrote this, but this is being shown that if we get into the analytical, we're locking it all. And I write Ana as in analase, the proteins, the brain. We go into a lockdown on the creative aspect, right? And it's just the main brain. There's many different subsets or bubbles within that. We don't want to get just trapped into one idea, one concept. This barrier was once part of the brain encasement, was set up that way as an entrapment system. Now I'm going to pause here and just give that a little bit of space. The reason is that goes back to what I wrote earlier about the stem cells. I'm sorry, the L1, the lines, and it talks about the octopus, right? We have these same things within our own body, within our own genome, but there were certain things, jump in the line, that were set up to stop it, to block it, right? So we're looking at, it was once part of this, what the brain was encased within. So in the next video, I'm going to go in the brain encasement, which has to do with the layers and the brain barriers. And it's so interesting because one of them, I can't remember the name right now. I think it's maybe it might be duramater, is, it means tough mother, so much in that. So it's encased in a tough mother, which is symbolic, the mother and the father, the left and the right hemispheres of the brain, the left and the right masculine, feminine. Okay. And it was set up that way on purpose, because otherwise we're going to mutate. It's going to lead to things jumping all over the place and not a particular order of anything. But from another perspective, it could have been done by whoever it was that may have worked on our DNA at some point in time. Or it could have been set up as, so I could go into so many different layers here. But what I'm writing about is it's no longer there in the same way. It's not, when we go into our heart brain, so it was set up that way as an entrapment system to trap into the folds of the brain particular particle pieces of information. And I'm going to end on that note, and we'll continue that in the next video. And I'll just say that from one perspective, this entrapment system can be seen as, oh, we've been entrapped and we've been stuck in this dimension, in this reality. But from another perspective, everything is in divine timing. And we've now accessed these deeper potentials. And how are we doing that? Through our heart-brain connection, through our ability to transcribe certain events, memories, genetically override certain genetic mutations or barriers that once kept us trapped in a particular, and I'm hearing trapezius shape in particular areas of the body that traps, heaviness on our shoulders, the neck, the cerebral spinal fluid. And what that did was it held within it, though. It's still there. That broken record, it's still inside of there. We just have to connect these things to help pull them up. And that's what we're doing, to access these deeper spaces. And by doing this, we're creating more space. And you guys, this is a reference also to the Earth, our solar system, the galaxy. This is a reference to our social system, our political system, even though it doesn't look like that. It's messy right now. One thing we've learned is that when we have these genetic mutations, it can lead to tumor or cancer. What are we seeing going on around us? But we're creating a different energy, a different expectation, a different experience. Therefore, the memories that we have of the past also are different. because we're looking at them from a different perspective. We're looking back while we're connected into the heart brain, and we're remembering them differently than, from one perspective, than they actually happened. But that's how we remember them now. And that could take me into so many different layers. But that memory is inside of us now. And now we're creating from that space. It's not that it didn't happen that way. It's that our perspective of how it happened has shifted. Therefore, our energy that goes into that memory and how it's stored is different now in the new human. Whew. Okay, I know that was a lot. This is all from my perspective. Hope you had fun with this video. If you've made it this far, gold stars for you. Thank you so much for tuning in and playing with this information and the way that I share it. And I'm just so grateful for you guys. Thank you. Namaste. To be continued, as always.